Hello, Papua New Guinea, and thanks for tuning in to another edition of Tanim Graun, where your voice, the voice of the ordinary, everyday Papua New Guinean, can help change what's happening in your country today. Limited access to electricity in PNG is a fundamental barrier to economic activity and delivery of key public services, including health and education. Indeed, there is a direct relationship between the absence of adequate energy and the services in many of our poverty indicators, such as infant mortality, illiteracy, and life expectancy. Inadequate access to energy also increases environmental degradation because our people are going to start chopping down trees in order to access energy. With that, what are we doing as a country to solve some of these challenges? Joining me on our panel today is Dr. Elizabeth Coppell. Welcome. Dr. Coppell is the Senior Research Fellow for the NRI based in Port Moresby. Also on my right, please welcome Mr. Michael Hansen. Michael is the Project Director for an interesting business called PNG Biomass, and he'll discuss that with us a little later. To my left, we're very, very pleased to have Dr. Clement Weiner. It's been a long time coming. Welcome to the show. Dr. Weiner is the Secretary for Department of State Enterprises, and we'll have some interesting discussions with you. Mr. Christian Lohberger. Mr. Lohberger is the Managing Director of Astra Solar, so he'll give us he's got a little solar thing there in the corner, and he'll tell us what that is all about a little bit later. And finally, after a long absence, blackout, welcome back Martin Namarong of the Namarong Report. Please give him a big hand. As a matter of policy, we try to have a balance between the different genders, but unfortunately, some of the invited females didn't turn up, but we're very grateful to have you here, Dr. Coppell. With that in mind, there's a list of questions that have been pre-submitted, and those will be asked by members of the audience as we go along. To start off, according to the Papua New Guinea government's medium-term plan number 2, approximately 83% of our population does not have access to energy or electricity. And progress in providing electricity to our people in rural areas has been slow. In some cases, the level of electricity services has been deteriorating because of insufficient funding for maintenance. I think we'll start this by maybe coming to you, Dr. Weiner. What do you say to that? You're in charge of policy.
Thank you, Alan, for moderating this discussion today, and thank you, Papua New Guinea audience. That's a good question. I think let's just to at least define things so that the discussions become a bit clearer, is that 80% of the population that doesn't have access is basically to electricity. There's this difference between energy and then electricity, because energy in its different forms, once it's converted, becomes electricity. And I think that's the thing that is the key to understanding how we get access to, or at least 80% of the population get access to electricity. So we have abundance of energy in Papua New Guinea. We have hydrocarbons in the form of oil and gas, coal in abundance in Papua New Guinea. We have abundance of geothermal sites that needs to be harnessed and converted into electricity. We have abundance of hydropower potential for at least estimated to be about 15,000 megawatts of hydropower capacity within the country. And we have about additional maybe 10 to 20 megawatts of potential power supply that could come from geothermal. And we have solar sites, we have wind potential, tidal basin, tidal projects, tidal waves, we have ocean, we have biomass. You can burn grass, you can burn trees, you can burn pretty much organic materials to get electricity. The question is, how do we convert those energy forms into electricity and then deliver to the 80% of the population? There has been some work done by Oil Church and Allied Energy, which Michael will talk about this, but it has been demonstrated that we have about 3 million households that are located within 20 kilometers of the major electricity corridor. That's the Ramo grid, all the way from Medellin to Bololo and up in the highlands. So we have about 3 million homes that we can target. And if we can do this with a good political consistently invest in basic substations and transformers, we could reach this target well within the next decade. But it's just that we need the right political solutions to do it, and the resource finance to be committed to reach that target. And then the issue is also about how do we get it to the rest of the people that are beyond the 20-kilometer distance. And that's where we need comprehensive energy policy. And my department has been working over the last, together with the Department of Petroleum and Energy, over the last couple of months. And I have here with me a copy of the National Energy Policy. And this is for the first time we have a draft National Energy Policy. We workshopped it to all the critical stakeholders in May. And the last time it was held was about a week ago. That's the final version of it. What I have in my hand is the penultimate draft. And hopefully in the next month, we'll take it to cabinet, and if the cabinet sanctions this policy, we'll take it all the way to parliament, and it will be sanctioned by parliament. And accompanying that, this energy policy document, we have the National Energy Plan, and how we can convert now or utilize energy for development purposes, whether we sell hydrocarbons to export markets around the world in terms of LNG cargoes or the oil exports. And how do we then capture some of this for our own domestic consumption and to light up the 80% of the people that are yet to be reached. So in a policy context, I think we've addressed some of these issues, but it's just now getting it through the process to get it sanctioned and then get the political buy-in to actually do some of those critical things. Cabinet made a decision. The installed capacity for electricity in the country is about 580 megawatts. Of those, PNG Power produces about 300 megawatts, and 280 megawatts is produced by the private sector, mines in general, for their own consumption. The cabinet actually sanctioned private sector proposals for electricity generations for potential 1,650 megawatts of new power to come on. So it took us 40 years to reach 580 megawatts of power, but cabinet approved for the next 10 years, we should have 1,650 megawatts if all of them come online. And these are by private sector participations or initiatives. And that's ranging from biomass by Michael's Allied Energy and Allshed's partnership in the Markham Valley. That's one proposal that's being sanctioned already by cabinet. We have several hydro projects, and we have also biomass coming from clean energy solutions for KVing, as well as other proposals for different energy sources that needs to be harnessed to generate electricity that's required. So I think we're addressing this at the policy level now.
Thank you, Dr. Weiner. Dr. Koppel, at NRI, obviously, you do a lot of work around what's happening in the country, and what do you have to say to this particular statement that 80% of our people don't have access to power, and given the intervention that Dr. Weiner just made?
I think it's great to know and see an energy policy in place. Well, you've got the draft document. Knowing that the majority of our people in the rural areas cannot access electricity, it's a big constraint to development. We want to achieve development, Vision 2050, the Millennium Development Goals. You can't achieve all that without electricity. We've got the informal economic policy in place, and I'm doing research on the informal economy. A lot of that cannot happen without access to electricity. And realistically, I commend what the department's doing, but realistically, we cannot achieve that. The private sector has to be a key partner to these development initiatives. If incentives were in place to get them on board, they would be able to provide for people in the outer islands, in the most remote parts of PNG, where main grid supply cannot reach. They've got abundance of waves on the islands. We've got rivers in the mountains, and that could be tapped into. So I think alongside the policy, we've got to take a comprehensive approach to it so that we can have infrastructure in place. We can address safety and security issues where power pylons don't get burnt down in tribal fights. So it's a whole package we have to work on. The policy in place will not alone solve our problems for the rural people in accessing electricity.
Thank you, Doctor. We've had the private sector being mentioned now, and I'll bring you in here. Mr. Lohberger, what do you say? You're a private sector person, obviously doing different things. What level of willingness in the energy sector is the private sector interested in coming on board?
Oh, look, there's huge willingness there. There's a massive untapped market out there. 83% of Papua New Guineans don't have electricity. So the private sector obviously sees that. That's a huge market that we can tap into, but we just need the channels to deliver the technology to get that electricity to the population. And as Dr. Wane said, PNG has abundant levels of energy. There's sunshine, there's wave power, there's hydro. It's just a matter of converting that energy into useful work. And we have the technology now with solar power, with hydropower, to put this into people's hands, but we just need to develop the channels to get that to the population where it's needed. Now, we're working on that. To a large extent, we already have a lot of those channels. There's commercial trading networks, there's NGOs, there's government departments. These people all have, these organisations all have roots in the rural population and the population without energy. And as we develop and bring the price down and we work together, we can roll out, we can get this electricity into the people, and then once they start using electricity and energy, it becomes self-perpetuating. It helps them develop education and commercial opportunities, and then, you know, once that develops, they start to need more energy and they broaden the channels themselves. So the demand is there, the energy is there. We just need to work getting it from centres like Port Moresby out into the rural underserved areas.
Thank you, Christian. Martin, I see you getting a bit itchy in there.
Alan, I like the aspirational statements about delivering to 3 million households and 83% of the population, but you know, the 17% of the population currently don't have access to reliable electricity supply. And for the past 40 years or so of independence, you know, PNG Power, they say PNG Power no got power. And that's because of the constant experience of blackouts, etc. So I'm just thinking 83% is about 4 times the current population, and we can't deliver electricity to the current 17%. How are we going to deliver electricity to the 83%? So, you know, I'm thinking, so from the private sector, what are the inefficiencies that exist that could help the current 17% that we could then translate into helping the 83%? Or from government, what are the inefficiencies that are experienced currently that could be looked at and enable 83% to have reliable power supply? Because it's one thing to have power lines going, but it's another thing to have reliable electricity supply.
Good point, Martin. And I think we'll save that thought and we'll come back to it. Right now, we'll take you to a talk out, and this is about biomass electricity generation. And after that, Michael is here, and we'll have an interesting discussion around that. Let's go to the talk out.
name Blomi Wayalangin, Council of the Village, a village Ward 29 lo Parel Jinchel Huon district. We start lo Kaminchelo Council lo 2008, coming up now. First time to roll biomass officers only Kaminchelo here, only asking more man lo here or Papa Graun lo here lo like planning do I want lo antablo ground blow. But all people know all thing all same because the story blow forestry was but planning do I by taking 30 years or lo harvest him or kind of same or 20 years or 15 years kind of same. Then the time all officers blow biomass only comes in the community maybe in on one boom. Or get a Papa Graun only comes down. This is the time all officers blow biomass come in lo bless blow me. Now only been making clear lo Papa Graun all same. People are planning do I this like do I'm gonna walk along by making all same by walking power or kind of same this like do I so. Or people one bell all to same by maybe 5 or 6 years when people harvest him. Oh old man how much this la. But so like him almost plan him do one him money area. So like one bell now na company set you on time when go na carry more agreement form me come now no line filling. Or Papa Graun all filling form now na start lo planning the wire.
Mi hamamas, lo biomass emi come up, lo place, emi no lo town, emi come through lo place, where mi no hard work lo go lo town, lo go lo one him up, lo pay money, mi start to solo place, biomass emi come up, mi make him work lo place, lo house do lo mi yet, na mix him ligri money, lo help him sit down lo, mi want him very picking.
Before mi place a cook, mi place a cook lo fire, mi place a kisi more firewood lo put him time mi place a cook lo fire straight. Na now all biomass kami I'll give me place cook stove ya. You no need lo kisi more plant firewood. Mi place a using branches lo this la diwaya. Bam la kisi put him swim taso luncha lo one emblem now. And mem sa make him fast. First, me pla can kai hurry up. Now give me pla light. One plus something two me pla can charge the phone. Do me pla want them all branches stove ya. Broken all branches but just la diwaya na ba me pla swim me go in charge. So emba give me pla service to one time.
I've seen this to me is very much similar to what I've seen up in West Africa, where the people are engaged from an early point, from early on in the project, and I think that's really important. We've seen it in Ghana, where people have been engaged from early on, and chiefs and paramount chiefs and villages being included in the project, and made sure that they become the part owners of the project.
Very interesting. Now a villager can just make a fire, cook their food, charge their phone, or even a light bulb. Michael, how brilliant is that?
It's great. Currently, we've got the BioLite representatives up in the Highlands doing demonstrations, and next week we're flying over to Bougainville. We've just had 2 days in the field in the Markham Valley.
with 2 types of stove. That's one of them, but we've got another one coming from Africa, which we're trialing in the valley. But that's part of our community development program. What the project is about, it's a joint venture between Oil Search and Aligned Energy. We've been operating in the country now for 4 years, working closely with PNG Power, and hopefully we'll be closing a power purchase agreement in the next few months with PNG Power to provide 30 megawatts of baseload power into the Ramu grid. It's one of a suite of projects that Oil Search currently is looking at to provide energy to the population of Papua New Guinea. You may have seen the commitment of Oil Search to connect between 100 and 200,000 houses between, I think, 2030, between now and 2030. And one of the motivations of this is that PNG is resource rich, is providing oil and gas, which is powering the lights of Japan and Korea. So it's only a fair expectation that the people in PNG benefit by an increased level of penetration of the electricity. Now we've been studying specifically the Ramu grid, the country as a whole, and we understand, or what from our studies we've shown, that there's between 2 and 3 million people within 20 kilometers of the Ramu grid. Now there are challenges in connecting them. We can't be kidding ourselves that the terrain isn't the easiest terrain, but we estimate that between 65 and 70% of the population of Papua New Guinea, it's feasible to economically give them grid connections over the next 2-3 decades. The government policy is to seek, the medium-term development plan is to seek 55% of PNG households are connected to electricity in 2025. But there's a suite of generation, of which biomass is one, gas, hydro. You need a portfolio of different generation options to produce the stable grid. You've got reliability is one issue. Grid connects. The actual cost, PNG's got one of the highest costs of electricity. So I believe that private sector organisations such as ourselves are working closely with PNG Power to solve some of these problems, and they are substantial problems. And as I said, they can't be all fixed with grid solutions. There is a significant portion of the population which is going to need off-grid, of which the stove is one of the options. And we're also looking at solar options for the off-grid solutions as well. Battery technology is getting better, so it's got to be a combination of generation options for the grid and off-grid solutions to solve the energy problems of PNG.
Thank you, Michael. We go to an audience question now. George Panau.
This was to Dr. White. What is the state of the nation's total electrification coverage? And I think more importantly, what is PNG Power and Department of State Enterprises doing to improve the coverage? Thank you.
What we need to do now is to extend that coverage to the rest of the 80% or 70% according to Vision 2050. That's the government vision or objective. To reach this, several things have to happen. One, we need to get the generation capacity up. Right now, it's, as I said, it's 580 megawatts of power. In the Ramu corridor, there's a lot of deficiency in terms of generation capacity. We need to address this, and I think that's why the big projects are being approved there. In the isolated communities, that has to be also addressed. We are doing that through biomass and other options that are available. And we also have to, in the generation space, allow the private sector to come on board. And for that to happen, there has to be right investment environment, and production of investments have to be, or the security of the investment have to be guaranteed, and all of those things. So the climate has to change. Part of the issues on the regulatory side has to be at least streamlined and enforced again, or reinforced. We are, as part of the energy policy, the document also calls for institutional arrangements to be at least improved to address those issues for both regulatory requirements or to encourage this. Again, going back to what Mike has said and what I said earlier on, you have about 2-3 million people that are right underneath the 20-kilometer corridor of the transmission, the Ramu transmission grid. That we can bring them online. And I know the geographical challenges, but the bigger challenge is political will. Do we have the political will to put the transformers, getting those high voltage power lines down into the low voltage that can go to households? At the same time, while we are getting into the last mile, we'll have to also consider about the affordability of the customers. We have, and we discussed this within the PNG Power Board, and we have the installation cost, which is around 500 kina. And the practice by the consumers is that they'd rather buy kerosene for 20 kina for a day or 3 days use, and then use it and go back and buy another 20 kina bottle for kerosene. So I think that is becoming an impediment, a barrier towards accessibility or access to the electricity. So we'll have to look at ways to lower that cost of installation from 500 kina down to maybe, I don't know, whatever that's reasonable and that commercial. So that's one big impediment. I'll give you an example of what I mean by this. I come from Kunia-Gembok electorate, and along that electorate, they pulled about almost 20 kilometers of power lines, transmission lines. And I sent my research staff up one weekend to count the number of households that are actually on this line. And it's about 61 households that are connected to that. So we have about like 6 million kina worth of investment that's going up, and power is moving, but we have only 61 people that are getting onto the connected to the grid. So this is the problem we face. Two things. One is the power is going, so there's a loss of power while it's still running along the line, and it's not available to the people that's needed. And two is that the affordability of the households to actually get the connection out to their houses. So those are the two issues that we face, and we need to address those issues. These are bottlenecks that I see. And we have to make those decisions at the political level. And then once we have the, step down the transformers, or have the transformers to step down the power to affordability, then we need to pull it down to those places, have the transformers on the power poles, so it can be accessed to, people can get access to them. So I think that's the problem. And I also said earlier on, the cabinet has actually approved 1,500 or 650, I think, megawatts of new installed projects, new projects. So we have the political will to do it. The private sector is now encouraged to come to the generation space, and hopefully that will free up some of the resource that PNG Power has been struggling with, or has been struggling with to meet, to cope with the demand. So I think once the PNG Power itself, once it is at this point in time, I think it's in ICU. We brought it out of ICU. I think it's sitting as a patient in the outpatient department, still lying on a bed. Once we get it out of the bed,
is it still on drip?
It's still on drips. While it gets out of it, well, not on drips really, but I mean, if you
heavy medication.
If you think of drips as just an overdraft facility, so it's out of there. It's not on drips, and now it's slowly recovering. And we have a good management. We have a new board. And I think we'll get this company up to where it needs to be. And within 2 years, we should be in a position where we could now talk about unbundling PNG Power in a more meaningful and commercial way that makes business sense. And then we could have the generation space. I think the generation space is opened up. That's why Allied Energy is doing the generation in Markham. But we have to encourage Allied Energy, with the, as he said, as Mike said, with the power purchase agreements and get them online quickly.
Well, can I just come in here quickly and just a follow-up? You mentioned the affordability issue of our people getting onto the grid. What can we do to improve that? If
just lower the barrier.
When we're working with Oil Search to try and achieve the goal of the 100,000 to 200,000, one of the major impediments is the last mile connection cost. So we've been looking at options with a rapid deployment grid connection blocks, which can quickly be fixed into a house. It has low voltage 12-volt LED bulbs, so you don't need an electrician to provide the internal distribution and 2 general purpose outlets. So we've been working with PNG Power on that box to try and drive the cost down. speed, the number of, because basically we're looking at 40 to 50 new connections a day. So we need to achieve that goal for oil search. So there needs to be a rapid, efficient, with a low cost to that last mile. So.
And the PNG Power is now a bit more proactive than it used to be. So the KPIs, the performance indicators for the management, there's a certain number of, I think it's about 30,000 households to be installed, connections to be made. So I think, and that's going to be how the board is going to assess the performance of the management. And I think in terms of the management now is more customer-oriented, customer-focused. So give them another 2 or 3 months, or maybe 6 months, and you'll see a lot more sort of close-up participation between the management and the customers.
So what you're saying is you don't need a few cartons of beer to get connected anymore?
No, we don't need a few cartons of beer. I'll show you an example. I had a problem with just outside Corobosea where I live, and there's a power pole that's being corroded right on the border because people made fires around it, and over the years it's been corroded. And I sent a picture to John Mangos, and I told him, hey, John, there's a problem here. You need to fix this, otherwise everybody's going to be electrocuted. And within 6 weeks, John got his team mobilized to do it. So I was expecting it to be done within 3 months, or maybe 6 months.
Yeah, maybe you can pass John Mangos' number on to us as well.
Yeah, I'm sure. The rest of Papua New Guinea watching will probably want John Mangos' phone number right now. Yeah,
I'm pretty sure you'll know where to find him. He used to have a digital number.
Okay, let's move to another audience question. Chris Bafmatu, please.
How can the private sector assist in improving the delivery of energy services in rural areas?
It's a model used across the globe where you have independent power producers. I guess I'm going to talk on a different scale about the on-grid solutions. Where we see we've probably got better access to technology from across the globe. We can act quicker. And I guess the important thing is access to financing and cash flow. If we invest and build a power station, we take that cash flow pressure off PNG Power. So they're able to invest in the grid with the capital they've got. They know that they've got reliable power coming at a known price for the next 30 years, but they're not having to find that upfront cost to build the power station. So we believe that it's a significant advantage to go down the track where you have more generation in IPPs, independent power producers.
You're watching Tanim Graun. We're discussing energy poverty in PNG, the challenges and solutions to powering development. Let's go to an audience question. Melvina Wagi.
The question goes to Dr. Waine. What is the status on the Yunkatu project and the proposed Purari and Brown River hydroelectric project?
Oh, okay, good question. We have 2 projects right now along the narrow Brown system. There's one further upstream, which is called the Narrow Brown project. That's done by World Bank and IPBC. That's going through feasibility right now. The geotech and the engineering part of it is now underway right now. There's another one that's promoted by a private sector that's downstream, and that's about 50 megawatts of power that's proposed. The issue is on the hydrology of it, because it gets a lot of power, over 50 megawatts during the wet season, and during the dry season it goes down to about 60 megawatts. So because of the variability in the production, the PNG Power has to meet the shortfall somehow, and we need to. So there's serious discussion going on right now at the board and management level with the developer to at least address this, how we partner this hydro with something else so that we don't have that shortfall during the dry season. So those 2 projects are one, the downstream project is probably the only shovel-ready project in the entire country right now. It's a hydro project. The upstream one is, as I said, it's going through a feasibility. The Purari project, we are in the process of setting up a Purari hydro company that's going to deal specifically with this project. It's been on the drawing board for the last, how many years, 40, 50 years now. The first work was done in 1946. The second work was done in 1956. Probably the most advanced one was done by Nippon Koei in 1976. And then it's been left off. And then It was picked up by Origin Energy together with PNG Sustainable a decade ago, I think, called the PNG Energy Development Limited, EDL. And then now the cabinet wants to, or the minister wants to bring it up and revive that company so that it's focused more on developing this as a special purpose vehicle. So that would have a capacity of about 2,500 megawatts, sort of proposed right now. Could potentially go up, and there's a lot of upstream activities that's being done right now. Towards the Karamui Plains and right at the junction of up along the the Wagi River, there's a project by Simple government together with private sector developer Salini from Italy, and they're just doing feasibility right now. That project could generate probably 920 megawatts to 1,000, or probably more than that megawatts of power. It's probably the biggest hydro project that will be done and advanced towards geotech drilling right now as we are talking. There are further upstream proposals for that. That's about 200, 300 megawatts of power that needs to be generated from the tributaries feeding the Wagi River and further down towards the Parari River. So there's a lot of proposals to harness this river system. And then we have a proposal for the Ramu 2, which is about, I think, 200 megawatts. That's now, the feasibility is completed. They're preparing the documents for it to go out tender if it hasn't gone out yet. So we are moving in different directions right now with these different hydro projects.
Thank you, Doctor. Let's go to another talk out. This one is on remote rural villages and their access to electricity. Let's look at those in Tamo village in Isipi.
Mai meta mana yanda punya yet mamo ai met ngai mai meta mana yanda punya yet mamo ai met ngai mai meta.
This is the place now you come looking at Tamo. Through I name plan I fire up long site the resource I own him, but the lifestyle I'm still way back compared to other villages long Pacific. And last place inside long Clay River. Then this the stream coming up. This the unbarred the Keram come as I said. It is called Clay River from the map. Now I know got plenty of services installed. The only two basic services health now, education also.
Me plagat ausik, me plagat school, me plagat strip. Aga school inanggap mani luksavene give him. Alpem kami ta school and me play it la main power me play community la kerapim school. Okay, ausik me plagat ausik to so me play nagata doctor. Me play doctor na planti trouble me play on or baby play me play especially on section immunization suit ya. Time Michel's, the outbreak na kam. Planti die, open cop to planti die, especially or baby. Okay, me plagat strip le me plagat on the tractor em sakati grass. Sa tractor, inanggap mani look saben na emekam. All money put in the slow big motor kanu blong or double kanu na karin sla tractor kanu so sa tractor sakati grass the strip. Na balu sek up and down. Okay, time solo come in. Come salen blay making blay big play chance. Very big chance. Like me plug and charging phone la solo through the solar and charging phone, through the solar, me plug an boom box, and give him the free light. Me plug at 4 plugin. One play most semblong, ishim la night no about. Another play most semblem type. Okay, narapla mo sem spotlight type. Okay, narapla mo sem chompo la mo plus stand up plus toble mi. Em segwi 24-hour service plus toble mi. Em modus la kan light em gim. Okay, this law sem spotlight type ya. Em say now mangi buy me also using long charging my phone, also charging my boombox. Also through the sunlight, mi plak sim alpin through the sunlight. Sunlight ko charge mo la the solar light towards imano rekola kam sale mi plak bay me. Before no got solar light lang also using my battery. Also using join battery. Popla I'm also using la charging phone. Pipe I'm also using la boom box. And big plak changes mi plak la solar light. Like me, I'm giving service to man come inside the store at night. I'm on place is blown. We make a generator, so many support on generator now. The solar light, we save more customers now. Solar light, the night time. Okay. Me help me mama la place losa deal with baby on solar light. Okay. Before me say you torch long all. Torch me say you long all. Now me can use solar light. Me to thank you la solar light. I'm on plan. Nar plan. Time me plakam lo night la kenu. By kenu la kare mol kago. I'm plakamos 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock night. Me place a solar place. And me place use solar light la come inside the house. Come inside. Okay, this a 24-hour service the house, the solar light. I'm light stop in this house, there's a security light. And me let me plakam open the door, go inside, put something. Na long caramel kago na come to the house. And because light is stop in this. And make him blaze la caramel something come. So now I'm plakam master some plaka solar light now. I'm okay helping me plan. Me play in a big community to master one time or two little community, but I'm gonna helping me plan. So stock it down, but mix me stock am help him all can last time. Mene sabe me plato to so midila ni bloka kisi bagapan ka look sabe le mi plo sample big mangilun palangrum baga look sabe le mi plo. Me pla start solo sa back page ni milul ko tempo baka mo front page and you play it.
And thank you to the people of Tamo for letting us intrude on their lives there with that story. And maybe, hopefully, they can come on the front page one day. That's probably the story in a lot of our villages, like that. Martin?
A lot of women give birth in the darkness, and such technology could really assist in improving the current horrific rates of maternal mortality that we have if the deliveries are done properly in a lot of the rural areas. So electricity isn't just about light for boom boxes and cold water and phones. It's really about saving lives as well. Being able to store drugs and immunization vials in cold storage. You need electricity for that, and so there's a real I guess challenge there that our people in rural areas currently face a disadvantage, and we have to look for solutions, whatever the mix is, to help improve their lives.
I think affordability is the real key. I'll come back to you here, Chris. If somebody bought a full container of those, say some business here in PNG, would they be able to get it cheap enough so that we can help a lot of these back page communities?
Yeah, if you bought a whole container, you would definitely get it at a lot cheaper price, but you've still got pretty significant costs to get it to that last mile. So where do you bring the container? You bring it to Moresby or you bring it to Ley. Sure, that's great, but then you've got the issues, the costs of securing it in Moresby, the administration and distribution costs. These all add up. The cost of the light isn't the main component of what's going to cost so much. It's getting it out there, getting it to the last mile. So I think as we strengthen these distribution networks and we get more of a commercial focus out in the rural areas, these costs will come down. But a lot of the times we're going into places where there's there's not a strong cash economy, there's not a strong retail culture. So these costs add up and they get a lot higher. So yes, we could get the product cheaper, but it's the costs in country that we've got to get down as well.
Okay, let's go to an audience question. Billy Yaya.
My question goes to Dr. Waine. With the prevailing El Nino condition, what preparations have been made to mitigate its effect on electricity generation?
Yeah, very good question. I think it's a very timely question. One thing I think I should appeal to, especially for residents of Port Moresby City, to be more conscious of how much water that they're using for shower and watering the gardens and things like that, because I think the El Nino might be going on for a long while, based upon the reports from the Oceanographic and Atmospheric Institute from USA. So I think it might last till the first quarter of next year. So just we need to be we need to be preserving those water that's coming down from Sirenomo, and Sirenomo is always prone because Sirenomo is located in a very poor catchment area, so it takes time to build up. But when the rain comes, it always falls on the other side of the catchment area, so it doesn't build up quickly. That's the big concern that we have within PNG Power right now. Up in Ramu, I think that's where the bigger concern is also there, because the river that's feeding the Ramu Dam, Yonki Dam, is a small river, so we're also concerned about that. But the management is being, I think it's now taking some proactive measures to address some of those issues. So we are also looking at how we can bring some of those generators on standby if the need arises. And ExxonMobil, with the recent MOU that's being signed for Port Moresby gas supply to be, so that project should kick in, should go into tender and construction, all of those things, once the negotiations for the gas agreements finalized. So these are all the things that we are working on right now to address the requirements within Port Moresby and in the Ramu grid, the Ramu system. I don't, there are no new projects coming on quickly, so it's got to be diesel solutions and thermal power generations. So that's what we are looking at. But I think the management will make a big statement coming shortly on how we are preparing to deal with the situation.
Just a follow-up to that. Given that we're getting El Ninos roughly what, every 10 years?
It comes every 15 years.
15 years. And the intention to build a lot more hydropower systems in terms of, mitigating future effects, if they're going to get worse as a result of climate change. Do you have plans in place?
That's why we need coal.
That's why we need coal.
Sorry, but we need to burn more gas. No, seriously, you told me to be a bit more humorous today. We'll have to look at the gas. We'll have to look at solar. We'll have to look at all of the above. We can't just bank on one thing. So that's why if you look at the profile of generation projects that have been approved by cabinet, we have 3 biomass in there. One from KVN, one from NBPOL, and we have one from this Allied Energy, from Ley. And then we have hydro projects, and then we have some diesel projects that have been approved for Ley. So it's a whole different mix. And going forward, we need a lot more gas to be made available to meet this, and we need more hydro to come on board. And then we'll have to look at the solar. The cost has to be low, because the solar cost is pretty high right now. So we need to bring it down. And also, as I said, we need to consider all of the above. We can't just restrict one or the other.
Coming back to this interest in rural people, in the energy policy, is the government interested to do more in terms of maybe making little solar systems available?
Yeah, we look at off-grid solutions. It's all captured in the energy plan as well as the policy itself for off-grid solutions, isolated communities. We have a biofuel policy which will be coming at the back of this energy policy as well. The biofuel policy, I think, it's a pretty good one. And the reason why is this, that most of the isolated communities are in the coastal areas, most of them. And the coastal areas have coconuts. So if we can find right technology to actually process coconut to produce the diesel, coconut biodiesel, then we can have fuel blends to feed generate the diesel generators. So we can reduce costs at the same time, create cash economy within the coastal communities, and mobilize those sort of empower the people, and the people can then be able to afford to buy electricity. So I think it's a win-win situation for biofuel, and that's why we are trying to encourage PNG Power to go towards the biodiesel, the fuel blend with the diesel. From coconuts. And I think the national planning, and I think, Alan, you've been involved to an extent to support the Karakar biodiesel project as well as the Alatau biodiesel project. And there is political will as from the Minister, Charles Hybel. So yes, that political will is there, and I think Cabinet supports this. We need to encourage this production of biodiesel within the coastal communities. And most of the diesel generators are right there. So I think it's a win-win situation.
Martin?
Well, Dr. Wainer, I'm interested in your comments with regards to, say, for instance, we have this really big gas project, and my understanding is that originally in the gas agreement, there wasn't any obligation on the developers to provide gas for domestic purposes. So how is the current arrangement with Exxon working out? Will that come from existing gas fields, or would that involve opening up new gas fields to supply electricity to Port Moresby?
I think the gas that's available to Port Moresby came from, if I remember it correctly, from gas Agora, I think, the field that was not initially in the initial agreement. So when that was muted to be brought online, I think that gas was made available to Port Moresby. And new projects going forward, we are working with Treasury to devise this national content policy as well as the domestic market obligation policy that should allow for some portion of the gas to be made available for local consumption, whether it's for petrochemical or whether it's for conversion to electricity. That's something that needs to be discussed through the policy consultation process, and we'll capture those discussions. There's some stranded gas fields that also need to come online, like Stanley gas fields, that we need to now promote them. We need to get through electricity to power up Okcheri, and if Frida gets online in the next decade or so. But we need to start thinking about those things right now.
Thank you, Dr. Wainer. You're watching Tanim Graun. We'll go to our last audience question now. Stefford Newline, could you ask your question, please?
My question is to Dr. Kopel. Can the benefits of cheap green electricity generation such as hydro and biofuels be used to introduce innovations such as electric cars and electric trains over the next decade?
In PNG, I think we need to think about providing electricity to our people before we can think about taking the next step. I think in Australia, they've been using solar energy to run cars. There's research in other countries, but the focus on PNG now should be to provide the basic electricity to our people, and then maybe we can worry about the next stage of development, because access to the basic is what we don't have, and to jump to the next stage is probably not a wise thing. Whether the universities have resources and expertise to do that is another question. We probably need people like, more people like Christian who come in to do research on things like that, and I don't think we've got the capacity to do that now. We should be more concerned about providing energy in whatever form for developing our country first. and then worry about that next step.
But Doctor, I guess just in line with that question that was asked, in terms of global trends, what innovations do you see that are taking place that PNG might want to look at to improve the technological mix in terms of delivering electricity to our people?
In terms of using, making cheaper transport, I know the buses that run in the UK are using electrical energy, not petrol. And they're doing research on looking at cars that, like building electrical cars for personal use. The buses they have are only, they can't make long distance travel. They just run within the city. But for someone who's considering traveling on the Highlands Highway, for example, you'd need a battery capacity that can store enough power to take you from point A to B.
Well, I've actually been doing a bit of work on this, doing some consultancy for a company in Australia that's developing hydrogen-powered vehicles. And what we're doing is we put together a proposal for Hyundai Motor Cars Australia, and they do a hydrogen-powered car. And the company I'm working with is developing hydrogen refuel stations. And our idea eventually is that these refuel stations will go out in, along highways. They'll be positioned with a large solar array or a wind turbine that creates electricity, and that electricity is used to turn water into hydrogen. And hydrogen, of course, is a very effective, very energy, it's got a lot of energy in it as a fuel. So this is one of the, it's zero carbon. I think this is one of the future technologies, because we have battery-powered cars. We have Tesla in America, Audi in Germany, BMW. They're all bringing out battery-powered models, and they work very well for cars, but they don't scale up very well for heavy transport like trucks and buses. For that, the size of the battery just gets too big, and eventually you wind up with something that's 80% battery. But there's technologies out there, hybrid cars, hydrogen cars, heavy vehicles, and to just cast forward a couple of years, self-driving cars are coming.
We've been discussing energy poverty in Papua New Guinea, challenges and solutions to powering development. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. Please join me in thanking our wonderful panel, Dr. Elizabeth Koppel, Dr. Clement Waine from the Department of State Enterprise, Christian Loberger. Michael Henson left us early in the piece, and we thank him very much for his participation. And finally, welcome back to the show, my young brother, Martin Namarong. Thank you for joining us, Papua New Guinea. This has been another Q&A program, and we hope you join us for the next Tanim Graun. Na tingim tok tok blong you by Tanim Graun. Thank you very much.